little friends. Welcome to the Sabbath School for Children. This week's lesson is titled Jesus Reads in the Synagogue with the memory verse. I will bless the Lord who guides me. Even at night my heart instructs me. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. Psalm 16, 7, 8. The Message tells us, we make Christ the center of our worship in response to God's great love. Now listen to the story for this week. Can you remember something that happened in your church that helped you stay close to God? It could have been a special song, a reading, a sermon, or anything else. When we worship God, we get to know Him better, and He can speak to us about His plans for us. Imagine a worship service like the one we'll describe. Jesus stood up to read the scriptures. The people in the village had been talking about Him, mentioning the sick people He had healed in other towns. Now He had returned to Nazareth, where He had grown up. On that day, there were more people in the synagogue than usual. Everyone had heard that one from their town had come back. They wanted to see how he had changed. Facing the synagogue attendees, Jesus opened the scroll of the scriptures. Everyone fell silent, waiting for his words. Jesus said he would read from the book of Isaiah, where the prophet says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come." People became interested in that text, especially in the way he read it. He spoke with authority, but also with kindness. When Jesus finished reading, he rolled up the book and handed it to the synagogue assistant, then sat down. Everyone wondered what would happen next. Jesus looked around and began to explain what he had read. He said, "Today, these scriptures are fulfilled in your hearing. You are looking at the person spoken of in the passage." People remembered him as a young man who could fix their broken furniture. Now he spoke of fixing hearts. The attendees looked at each other. Not everyone was pleased with Jesus' comments about himself. Some were angry because he hadn't performed any miracles. They wanted more proof besides the stories they had heard from Capernaum. After all, they had known this man since his childhood. Suddenly, one of the elders stood up and said angrily, "What's wrong with you? Have you forgotten who Jesus is? He's no better than us. He's just Joseph's son." "That's right," another elder exclaimed. "Why do you follow him like a flock of goats?" "Jesus has done much good. No one can deny the healings he has performed," observed another person. "Healings? He hasn't done any of that here in Nazareth." People were starting to form factions. Many supported the first elder's opinion. People shouted to make themselves heard. The synagogue was in turmoil. No one saw who first seized Jesus, but others followed suit. They pushed him outside. The crowd led Jesus to the cliff outside the town. For a moment, it seemed like the end of Jesus' ministry in the very town where he had grown up. The noisy crowd approached the cliff, but suddenly they stopped. Where was Jesus? They couldn't see him anywhere. They hadn't seen the angels who had accompanied him in the synagogue, stayed by his side during the journey to the cliff, and ultimately led him to a safe place. People finally understood that Jesus was not with them. They returned to their homes very confused. They had known Jesus while he lived among them. They had had the opportunity to believe in him after witnessing the wonderful work he had done in nearby towns. But they couldn't believe he was anyone other than the young man who had grown up among them. If you want to know more about this story, look in your Bible at Luke 4:16, 30, and you can also find more in The Desire of Ages in chapter 24. Support this content by sharing and subscribing to the channel. May God bless you abundantly. See you next week.